So welcome to Castable NYC's Actors Discuss project. Actors Discuss project is Actors Discuss project. Actors Discuss project. Realize we're not called Actors Discuss. I don't know why I said
what.
I said it, and I'm like, that's not what we call it.
I was like, did I miss that in the meeting where we renamed it?
And there's a lot of words. Actors Discuss projects at home, quarantine edition. Thank you for joining us.
The logo for that.
Day 2.
Maybe playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, but I think you could argue that Paige is actually a pretty sympathetic character. Like, obviously she has a level of controlling and like is the planner of all of this, but to imagine that, you know, your husband found his college crush who he's cheating on you with, and your envelope is about the first time you saw, I think she calls him Lars of Arabia, dressed as T.E. Lawrence in this party, and she loved him and she feels all these things. Like, one of the reasons I was thinking about that she kept Mike around is Mike's going to be the only one who mourns her death at this point. I mean, Lars is over her. Hal has always despised her and claims that she tried to cheat on, you know, she tried to sleep with him. She says he tried to sleep with her and all of Mags's friends. So when you have Mike come in, he's really the only one on Paige's side through most of this. So I always find that a little bit interesting. And like, how do you portray Paige as a sympathetic character now that we know the ending?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you make. And I think she talks about it a little bit too when Mike is like, what is it that you do? And she's like, I do absolutely nothing. And I think that speaks to, you know, that end that she has for herself as well. Yeah, I think there is a lot of sympathy to be had for somebody like that.
Yeah, I mean, the almost murder of Lars definitely reveals his true nature. Amanda M., go ahead.
I also think it's interesting because this play is written by a woman and the lead character is a woman, and to have more depth to her than some people may just read it the first time and just be like, oh, she's a bitch. Women are bitches. And like have that just be like a surface value sort of thing. And then finding levels and things like this isn't just a person who's conniving and malicious. Like, she's this way for reasons that may or may not be as openly discussed. Even though all of the dialogue is very open and direct, it's also not direct in that way a lot of the time. It like circles around it and it's like, oh, you want to go there? I'll go there. But then they don't. So it's interesting.
All right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Andre.
No, I was going to say, I did think she was in pain. Like, she was just hurting. No one there really likes her. Again, she does nothing, like we all said. And the other thing is like, she kind of gave Lars this lifestyle, and it wasn't enough. Like, even though he took her money and traded it, it was like she did have the small fortune, and she seems like she's a planner and would try to plan out things for him, but he just didn't love her. So I think she was just hurting. And
yeah, I think maybe if you think about from a bigger picture, and like especially after hearing Amanda make her point, like Paige seems to struggle from like a sense of identity, because Lars has one author, Hal has one like microbiologist, Cheyenne has one who, you know, is a journalist / newscaster.
And then she bring it up.
Yeah.
She like brought those up, right?
Yeah. I think that's kind of it. She's saying you all have your identities.
Yeah.
And even with Cheyenne, you know, that gets demoralized by Hal, who calls her like a news babe or whatever. And even with Win as an artist, her art is sexualized too by her husband, even though she says like it's not, like it doesn't have to be that. So it's like with Paige, and I don't know, maybe I'm thinking even more like if you think of like traditional roles of women, like it's either based on your looks, your sex, or you know, being a housewife, which she obviously isn't because she's got the waiter. So she's like, okay, well,
And no children.
yeah, and no children. And it's like, okay, what else am I doing on this earth? And I wonder, I wonder if like in a twisted way, like reading Laura's book drove her to that, to do that. Like this is what she like it has manifested this end for herself very cleanly.
Yeah, and she did it all without reading much of the book.
And
So
wait, and can I just say like the point of her not having children being brought up and Wynn's immediate response is, "Oh, you couldn't have them?" Not that she didn't want them, because that's such a thing too for women. It's like if you don't want kids, something's wrong with you, or like, really? Oh no, you'll change your mind. Like that whole topic that goes on all the time. That I think is really interesting in this play as well. That's like the immediate response, like, "Oh, what? Oh, something's wrong with you. You couldn't have them. Is that why you don't have them? Because you would have them if you wanted them."
well, it's one of the things Lars says about her when he says she's, you know, she's decomposing. She's on that downswing, kind of gives you the idea of like, oh, she's played by an older actress who's probably past the childbearing age, especially because Wynn has 2 adult children.
Mm.
You know, so you have these people who are past that point in their life to not have that connection to the world, whether she chose to or not. She's missing that.
Mm. It's
And,
interesting too, though, like there's evidence that she's played by an older actress, but that could happen at any point, starting at like 30. People start to question you. Like, I get ads all the time for freezing my eggs on the internet, just based on my age and demographic and everything. And I'm like, that's rude. Like,
all right, well, on to our favorite topic of this play, which is
It's great.
the meal courses. What do y'all think of
fold in the cheese.
what do you think of each of the things that she gives to her guests to eat? The salads, not the salad, sorry, the soups, the piece of cabbage for Win, and the still alive lobsters, and of course the dessert of the frozen waste. Amanda A, go ahead.
Well, it's all very like on the nose symbolic of, you know, killing living things.
Yeah, I think that's a good point with it. Josue.
Yeah, there's like the part I found like annoying because it is so on the nose. Like it's not symbolic, it's just like in your face, and she tells you everything. She's like, this is what this means for you. And it's like, okay, well, you just did all the work for me. There's like no room for metaphor or anything like that. And I don't know, I think it makes sense because, you know, she is this like very master puppeteer, but it's almost like I don't know, it's like she proxies for the playwright almost. Like she's very much writing this narrative in the play itself. And I wonder if like maybe you think about it deeper, maybe there's a play within a play, but yeah, I mean, I think on the question of the dishes, it's like it's right there in the text. There's no sub about it. It's above ground.
Shio, go ahead.
So while I do agree, yes, obviously the meals that she presents them with are very on the nose. I thought what was more important was the reactions and the behavior to the meals. So for example, the whole lobster thing about, you know, you're killing something, but she's also giving you a choice here. Give the lobster freedom or boil him to death and face it, you know. And you see a couple of people, they're like, no, we're gonna pick freedom. And then you have Shan, who's like, yeah, let's kill this motherfucker. Like, I want to see it. She's really hardcore. But then you have Lars, who just sits there and doesn't make a choice. He asks the waiter to remove the lobster away from him. And I think in the end, Win is the one who makes a choice for him to give the lobster his freedom. So I think a lot of it is the beauty in it, and maybe the metaphors that you're looking for don't lie within necessarily the on the nose dishes, but really the behavior, the reaction. That's where the beauty of the story really is.
Well, I think it just says something because, I I think sometimes you are in there with a relationship where you're like, yeah, they're not a good cook, but I love them, so I will eat their dishes and I will support them. And even in the worst conditions, Win is probably by all rights not that great of an artist, but Lars is so supportive of her and she supports his book. And then Paige comes out with the primordial soup, and it's like, this is disgusting. No one wants it. And all of a sudden you see who supports who in those relationships.
And even I thought was kind of sorry, I thought it was kind of touching was Mike was really the only one that was eating the just desserts, which was the frozen waste. And when Lars was like, why are you even eating it? And he's like, well, she prepared it. And he was like, I know this sucks, but she made this for you, and it's kind of rude to not eat it. So like, just to what you're saying, like Mike was the only one that was really like, all right, gobbling it up. And he was the only one, like, again, that we mentioned earlier, it's the only one in her corner.
Yeah. I love that it's one of you might have a fuzzy tomato from the back of the fridge. Anyone else any thoughts on it, or?
I was looking at it like these are the things that she controls, and like she finally had some power, some sort of power, especially over the people who don't really see her, don't really know her, and don't really like her. And they're at this dinner party, and it's not really about Lars, it is about her, and she's controlling every piece of the narrative. They're not even listening to her describe and like really taking it in and really questioning, like, are you okay? Like, is something is wrong, and this whole thing is wrong, and maybe like
They're just
Lars
like, oh, this
hasn't.
bitch is at it again.
Yeah, it was kind of just like, here we go. He could have been like, let's end this night, or this isn't what we want, or pull it to the side, what's really going on. And he never really does that. He only does it for Wen, who is saying crazy things all night. So I thought the food represented maybe her control, and like, look what I've done, and here's the depth of which I've thought about these dishes. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it. Josue?
That's a really interesting point that Andre made about like how, yeah, nobody reacted to that. So I wonder if like, we're talking about this being like her plan and kind of her grand scheme, but does she act like this normally, or is everybody around her so terrible that when she is putting this like spectacle and like, I guess I don't know how obvious it is, because we have the hindsight, but it is this like maybe plea for help, or like, hey, something's wrong here. Nobody really bats an eye. And I think it seemed like, yeah, it seemed like everybody was kind of willing to go with it, with everything, as bizarre as it was, like up until like eating frozen trash. But yeah, I wonder like like, is there a normal dinner party that they had, or is Paige always kind of like, oh, she's just quirky, let her be that way?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think they're a little accustomed to her being a little, all right, she's just being this weird bitch, cool. But there's also a lack of empathy in them. And I think we see it clearly when Shan literally makes a joke about Hal's ex-wife Mags committing suicide, attempted suicide 5 times. She lists out each single one, and she's like, guess it didn't take, like, I guess, she tried, good on her for trying, and I think there's a lot of that lack of empathy in all of them, really. So I think it's like a combination of those two things that you're saying. It's like, okay, Paige is a little bit of a snidey, sassy little bitch, but there's also like, we don't really care that much about her, and we're just here because we're friends with Lars and he wrote a book, and it's just, it's a good etiquette to come and celebrate our friend.
Yeah, I think that. And
And to that point, I wonder, like, even though all the dialogue seems very direct, how much of it, again, is indirect. And if this is through the courses, they're putting out this terrible food and no one is saying it because it's the one time that they're like saving face because they're like classy, so you don't trash on it. But how many other dinner parties did Paige like actually try to cook and it came out terrible and or decent and they still ripped it apart no matter what? That by this point where she's already had this really elaborate plan, that she's just going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to make them frozen garbage because that's what they called my last dessert. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's this frozen garbage? Like, and she's like, and now it is literal frozen garbage. And then, of course, like after reading it a second time, because the first time Paige makes the comment of like, oh, this lobster is like me, so therefore it must go in the pot, like it must die. Until later, like you don't realize what that's even about. You're just like, well, she dark, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then reading it the second time, you're like, oh, yeah, the lobster sacrificing itself. Okay.
Andre.
I wonder if it's kind of a classism thing, and I know they talked about at one point being elitist, and I want to say not apologizing about being elitist, but I think sometimes when you are really successful, you have a lot of money, you kind sometimes when we see people like this, it almost seems like they don't really see the world, or they're not empathetic at all, not even to each other. And maybe that's the reason things aren't called out, because we're so wrapped up in our own success and our own things, and chasing that success and chasing what the elite looks like her being a rich housewife and not feeling like she didn't do anything. Because like a lot of times, don't the stereotype for a rich housewife is like she just sits around and drinks all day and she really can't cook, and she might throw a dinner party here or there. So it could be normal for them. And they could not, I don't think they could see the cry for help just because we're at a certain class level. I think maybe Mike being there, he could see it. Because we tend to see when someone's hurting when you're at a lower class, because you're not seeing the big house and cars and success that someone is having. So is that possible? Maybe it was a class thing.
It's also interesting that correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Paige is the only one that really truly comes from money. Everyone else has climbed up the ladder, so they feel they have to put on a certain kind of facade that maybe they feel like they can't, like, oh, we're above empathy, we're better than you, we're better than that. And she's just like, I found people that weren't like that to try to get some kind of empathy out of my friends and family and husband and all this, and I'm worse off for it in a way.
Yeah, even when I even thought, like, when Lars says, why didn't you rob our house? Like, there are nicer houses on the block. Like, what? That elite factor, rich people sometimes don't see the world like, and have empathy for the world like people in lower standings.
Yeah, I think that's all really good points. So, of course, the last and most important question of our discussion: would you eat any of those dishes?
I eat the Sure, but I wouldn't cook it myself.
I'd eat the raw cabbage.
I'm not gonna lie, I would have left already. Babe, we're not doing this. Come on. After the soup and to more than the food, the back and forth, we shouldn't be here. Like I shouldn't be in the room with this.
That was one thing I thought about too, like seeing it, like there are so many pages where it's two people back and forth and it gets like really tense.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I know it's an etiquette thing of just like, okay, we're just gonna like keep eating our food, but you can't do that either because the food's all garbage. So it's kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna keep drinking, I guess.
That's my favorite line. We need more drinks.
Yeah. I'd eat the live lobster, like once it was boiled. I would eat that.
No, we're going home. No,
I
we'll
would.
stop on McDonald's on the way. I know that's worse, but
No,
I don't want to see my food live. I don't want to know that.
Have you ever been to a Chinese food restaurant and they have the aquarium?
And you pick your lobster.
Mm-mm.
Same
Nope.
thing.
Well, anyway, I would eat the lobster. That's the only one though.
I also think that it's interesting in terms of not leaving if we do compare it to something like Housewives or something again, where it's that kind of drama where like how many times have you watched a train wreck and you're just like, ooh, this is good, but I'm not gonna get involved, but I'm gonna watch it. And then when we leave, we're gonna be like, oh, thank God we're not like them. Like that kind of behavior, which is like so fucked up.
It's definitely an aspect of it. But yeah, thank you guys for all of your thoughts and work on this topic. It was really a lot of fun. I'm glad we enjoyed this play, and thank you for watching. Follow us at CastableNYC on Instagram. If you'd like to be a part of these discussions, you can always email us to join our mailing list and join our group.
Yay.
Oh, what a crazy ass show.
You're still recording.
Yeah, I know, but we're done.
I'll put that in. Yes, I will.